Hello, it's episode 20. Well done for getting this far. It's a good time to talk about what we're going to do in the remaining episodes. I'm not sure how many it'll be. I'm thinking maybe 10 more, maybe less, don't know. But I have had to figure out a lot about what this game is going to be in order to figure out what to teach next. So this episode I think we're going to do this bit, which is pressing E to take out guards and also to collect treasure. So basically we're going to add a use button and a lot of things that can be used. One of those things will be the weapons that we already have. So instead of just walking into them, you press use to pick them up. And that's because I think later on we will have them replace the weapon you're currently carrying. So there'll be a reason not to pick them up, so you don't want it to happen automatically. And then pressing E on guards to knock them out I think will be cool. The idea there is that you can make the stealth part easier for yourself by sneaking up on guards and taking them out. But until now, the design for the game has been that there'll be an alarm switch you have to pull, and that will summon the guards. So the idea is that either you get caught trying to steal all the cool weapons and stuff around the level, or you don't get caught, you get all the best equipment, and then you pull the switch and you take everything on. I now think we can do better than that, because what if things like picking up a weapon and taking out a guard raised the alarm level but didn't immediately trigger everything? So it's like you can have 3 of those before you trigger the alarm. There's like 3 alarm levels, and once you hit max, that's when everything floods in. The reason that might be cool is that if you then had a bunch of guns lying around the level, a bunch of guards that you might want to take out, and some treasures as well, now you've got to make real decisions about, is it more important that I get a good weapon so I can take everything out when the flood comes in? Or is it more important to take out these guards so that I don't get caught prematurely and I get all the time I need to get all the rest of the things I want? Or is it better to just go for treasure and I'll just deal with the wave with my bad current weapon and that kind of stuff? And that kind of balance and tension is good in games, I think. You might notice I've also written a working title there. This is because I was thinking we've just got guns lying around on the floor at the moment. I think there's guns and also treasures and also probably like health packs and other pickups and things. They should all be on some standard sort of, I don't know, plinth is what I thought of, just like a raised platform. And then I was thinking, why would there be a bunch of guns on plinths? And well, if it's a gun museum, then that makes perfect sense. So No Floating the Gun Museum is a working title. We might change that, but it's working for now. And I also have decided that I'm pretty sure we will generate levels, because I've done some thinking about how it could work, and I think I have an idea for a fairly lightweight level generator that will be achievable in a tutorial context, because a full level generator can get very complicated, but what we want to do is just a simple one just to show the principle of generating levels and how, let's find out whether it adds a lot of value and how much work it is. But I think we can do one that's fairly easy on the work side of things. And then one other section here is just that we need you to carry things between levels, because then we can have a roguelike structure, right, where you get as far as you can get, and when you die, you're all the way back to the start, but things are randomized between levels, and getting a good weapon then has a lot more meaning because you're going to bring it to the next level. So today it's the use thing, and I was pretty pleased with the solution I found for this, because this is a problem I've had in probably every game I've made. And so let me try and explain the problem. We're going to be walking around the world, and we're going to want to interact with a bunch of different things. And so some of them will be weapons, some of them will be guards, some of them will be treasures. And when we use the thing, something different is going to happen in all those contexts, right? And so we have this slightly strange situation where we kind of want all those things to be the same, because, or have something in common, because what we want to do is look for the nearest one. So let's imagine that we are, where is the player? Player's here, they're right next to a weapon, and they're also right next to a guard, and both are in use range, and we're trying to pick up the weapon because it's the closest thing. We've moved closer to the weapon than we have to the guard, we want to pick up the weapon. For us to write some code that will ensure we pick up the closest thing, we want to look through all the things you could use, right? We want a big list of all the usable things. And then we want to tell that usable thing, hey, you've been used. But then the tricky part is that the usable thing, if we wrote some script for a usable thing, what does the be used function look like? Well, it can't be a single universal thing, right? Because what happens when a weapon is used is different to what happens when a guard is used, is different to what happens when a health pack is used. But we already have a system for that, something like that, right? When we did our menu, let me find the canvas. We got all these buttons on the menu, And they are all the same type of thing. They're the same button script, but they all do different things when you use them. And so I think we can do the same principle for using things in the world. So I think we'll start with weapons, because that's the most sort of obvious case for picking something up. And so we're not going to change our weapon class, weapon behavior. We are just going to add a new script to it. Add component, new script, and I'm going to call it usable. Note on spelling here, I think the correct spelling of usable actually doesn't have the E after the S, but I find that weird to read. It looks like usable. So I'm writing it with the full word use in there, just because it's easier for me to read that and remember what it is. Once it starts, we'll open it up. And so we want a list of these things. So references will need a list of all the usables. So that'll be the first thing we do once Visual Studio actually exists. So before we write anything here, I'm going to go to references, and then just like we have a list of enemies, we can have a list of usables, and I'll just call it usables, and there's a new list of usables. So that list will be created, and usables, let's actually go to, let's look at how enemy spawner does it. How do they add themselves to the list? It's on enable and on disable. I like to just copy paste this because it's exactly the same for everything. I'm even going to delete everything in our usable class and just copy and paste this. Obviously we don't want to add ourselves to the spawners list, we want to add ourselves to the usables list, and we want to remove ourselves from the usables list. And then the only other thing our usable class needs to do is it needs a public Unity event. It's not coming up as autocomplete, so I'm going to hit Alt Enter, and because I'm pretty sure I'm right about what this thing is. Yes, Unity event using Unity engine.events, we want that one. So I am right, that is the name of the thing, and it's added this line using Unity engine.events. Shall we say on use, or when used, maybe? Not sure about that name. And then we'll have a public void that's just use. And so that is what the player is going to tell us to do. They're going to say, hey, I've used you, do your thing. And what is our thing? Well, it's just going to be when used dot invoke. And so that's what we do to our buttons, right? We just said, let me bring it up to prove that that is what we did. When a button is clicked, here we just do event to trigger dot invoke. An event to trigger is this Unity event. That is the thing that we can access in the inspector, and we can hook it up to something else. We can wire it up. It's like a bit of wire we can wire to other things. Yeah, I think that's the entire usable class. I think that's all we need. And then the rest of the code is going to live on the player, probably. Let me just, first of all, configure this. Oh yeah, there's, so what we want to do is, now that we have a usable script, we've got the slot for when used. We add here, and it's going to want to know what, we can run any method function on any script on any game object. The only catch is we have to be sure that game object would exist and be accessible to us. And of course, in this case, we only want to run something on ourselves. So it will be, we're going to drag weapon in there, the very object that this is already running on. And then we click down here. What I want, we can go into weapon behavior. What I want is a function here that's like be picked up, but we don't actually have that function yet. We did a slightly cheeky thing, and we wrote all that in the player behavior. So right now the way our pickup system works is the player blunders around, and if they hit a trigger, they check, is that trigger, does that have a weapon on it? And if it does, I'm going to equip that weapon. Now we don't want that to happen, so I'm going to copy, so all this code, we want this code now in our usable, in our weapon behavior, because it's specific to weapons. All of this is about weapons, like their weapon, we're moving the weapon, we're setting its parent, we're doing stuff like that. So in fact, I'm going to be very specific, and I'm going to say, in our weapon behavior, I'm going to make a new function called public void be picked up by player, because this will only work for the player. If we ever want guards to pick up weapons, we'll need to do something different for that. But this code already exists, except it's all written from the wrong perspective. This is kind of like if you were trying to edit a short story or something and it's written in first person and you want it to be in third person, you've got to go through and change every I to they or whatever. So here, every time it says their weapon, that's actually us. We want to say this. And every time it doesn't say anything at all, that weapons.add, well, what's weapons? That's on the player, isn't it? So we want references dot the player dot weapons. That still isn't going to work because we actually need the players. So if we go to references, let's just see why that's not working. The player is a game object. We're actually just talking about the object that's walking around. And we might leave it that way because I think a lot of stuff refers to the player. Let's check that. Find all references is so useful when you're deciding whether to change your code. Yeah, there's so many things that reference the player. I mean, we check whether it's null. We check its transform position. But transform position's okay, because even if it was a script, we could still access its transform position that same way. We don't have to, talk about its game object or anything. And so actually, now that I look at this, although there's a lot of them, none of them really depend on it being a game object. And as I look at our references class, I notice that's the only game object left here. With canvas, that used to be a game object, we changed it to canvas behavior. I think it's just good practice to make things specific classes rather than game objects, unless it really needs to be. So let's actually just make this a player behavior. And we will hit a bunch of problems because player themselves, right at the top, they set references.player to their game object. Well, now it should just be this. It should be the player behavior itself. Can I refresh this search, or do I have to search again? I feel like there's a refresh button somewhere. Maybe not. Well, anyway, let's just right-click on this and say find all references again. I guess the references would be largely the same. It's just a question of which ones still make sense. Yep, this all works. So actually, let's go back to our weapon behavior, which is what we're working on, and see references.theplayer.weapons.add this works fine. Now, to go back to what I was saying earlier, every time we say their weapon, we actually mean us. So we can delete that. But now, of course, we're saying transform.position equals transform.position. That's not what we mean. We mean references.theplayer. It's not competing because I'm adding it onto the start of a word. References.theplayer.transform position. And I'm just going to copy and paste that. So this is the code that moves it to player's location. In fact, let's say move us to player's location. Add us to player's internal list. And again, anywhere it says their weapon, we can just get rid of it. Anywhere it doesn't specify what it's on, we need to specify that we mean the player. And then, yeah, this thing about the player changing weapon index, this is rather awkward, isn't it? Let's jump to this. So it has an error right now because we can't access it. It's inaccessible due to its protection level. What that means is it's because we said it was private. But also I don't like that we have to pass in. The other problem with this is it doesn't like the word weapons there. That's because it's not our weapons that we need to access. It's the references.theplayer.weapons, and that is a whole monster line. So I don't like this being private is fine. Let's make a new function that's just public void select latest weapon, and that will just do change weapon index to weapons dot count -1. That's exactly the line of code that I just had in weapon behavior. That I could have copied and pasted it, but I didn't. I wrote it out again. So that's the same line of code we had there, and now I just want to select. Did I not make this one public? Did I make the same mistake again? Oh, I made it pubic instead of public. Sorry. It makes sense that I can't access that from outside. Select latest weapon. Okay. So that's, now we converted all of our pickup code into something that the weapon behavior can run. It was a bit weird that was on player in the first place, because it needed to know a lot about the weapon itself. Yeah, and this all should work now. Yeah. And so we want to go back to inspector and our usable. I'm antsy to play again because I'm making that change to player behavior, like the references to the player behavior instead of the game object, is quite a big change. So I want to check that we didn't break anything, and also I didn't do it in my practice. So now we go to weapon behavior and be picked up by player. So every weapon now knows that if we tell it to be used, then it should be picked up by the player. Let's see, we don't yet have any code for actually picking it up. Let me just play the game and just check to see if we've broken anything yet. So this won't work yet. I'm surprised the menu's up when we start. Oh, I did that. Sorry. Yeah, that was me. I wanted to show you the button, so I undisabled the main menu. But that's not a good idea. We actually don't want that to happen. But it seemed to run, didn't it? It didn't crash. Oh, we get shot immediately because they started us right in front of a guard. It's quite a harsh game now. So maybe I'll undo that as well. Let's not be 2D. Let's go to the player, and let's just at least move us out of the way of that guy. Okay, so the way I described this working is, oh, first of all, I should get rid of all this now. This is just to pick things up on touch. We don't want to do that anymore. What we now want to do, write in update, here's player's update. We've got some code for like when you fire, you should fire this weapon. When you press fire 2, we're going to switch weapons. Now we want a line of code that's something like if input.get button down use, then it's added a load of brackets and quotes to me, then use the nearest usable. So before I write this code, we've referenced a control there that we haven't set up. We never told it what use is, so we should go do that. We go to edit, project settings, and I just remembered I forgot to set a timer for this, so I want to know how long. Yeah, let me just set like 40 minutes from now. Yes, in input we got all these inputs, some of which are, I noticed we've got 2 jumps here. I don't know what's going on with that. One of them uses a joystick button, the other one doesn't. Anyway, we don't have a jump key. I'm just going to replace jump. This is going to be use now. And instead of space, it's going to be E. And that's it, I think. Let me just click elsewhere so to ensure it registers that I've entered that. So now we set up the button. And now how do we use the nearest usable? Well, what is the nearest usable? We want to go through the list of usables and find the closest one. So I'm going to define a, usable. And it's just going to equal null at first. And then I'm also going to define a float for nearest distance. And I'm going to set that to, shall I say 3? And I'll explain why in a minute. But then to actually search through them, we want to do for each usable, this usable in references, references dot usables. And then in here we'll check their distances, but I want to explain what we've done there. I can't remember if we've used for each before. Can I find all that? No, we've never used for each before. Wait, it seems to think we haven't used it even now, and I clearly have. So let me search more thoroughly. Oh, we did do this. Okay, cool. Yeah, so in our railgun beam, we wanted to look through every package of hit information in our big list of hit information that we got back. And in this case, we want to look through every usable in our list of usables. So references.usables is all the usables that exist in the level and are currently active. And when we say for each like this, that means within this, if I say for this.usable, if I said destroy this usable, please autocomplete, game object, that would destroy every game object that has a usable component on it. in the world. So for each one, it's going to do that to it. We don't want to destroy them. We want to say, we want to find out how far away they are. This distance equals vector3 dot, call vector3 hotline and ask it for the distance between 2 points. We want to know the distance between our position, transform dot position, and their position, which is this. Sorry, I keep auto-completing usable. I keep auto-completing this the wrong way. This usable transform dot position. That's how far away it is from us. And now, if this distance is, I shouldn't use the word this because the word this means something by itself, and so every time I type the word this, it thinks it doesn't auto-complete what I want. Only if this distance is less than or equal to nearest distance, then we'll say the nearest usable is this usable, and the nearest distance is this distance. And at the end of all that, nearest usable will be set to the nearest usable, and nearest distance will be set to the nearest distance. We don't need nearest distance after this point, but we need to update it every time we do this. So this is a really common pattern that you will end up using a lot in programming to look for the closest object in a list, or the best object in a list. For some version of best. In this case, best is closest. Whatever's closest to us is what we want to use. If we wanted to get really fancy, actually, we could even check, like, is it in front of us and stuff like that. But for our purposes, just closest is fine. But I want to explain how this works, because it might look a little bit weird in that, first of all, why did I pick 3 there? Well, actually, this is where we set the max range. We could have a variable for this that we set in the inspector, like, maximum pickup distance. In fact, maximum pickup distance, if nothing is closer than this, nothing will be chosen. So that's why we set the initial nearest distance to 3. We pretend there's something at range 3, and if nothing's that good, then everything's out of range, so we don't select anything at all. Then as we go through the list, each time we look at the distance. Let me just comment all of this. So, how far is this one from the player? Is that closer than anything else we've found? So if we already found one closer, then we ignore this. It is. Remember that this is now the closest one we've found. So this doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to stick with this one. It's just the nearest one so far. In fact, let's call it that. Let's rename this nearest usable so far. And so yeah, when we set this, we don't know for sure it is the closest usable of all of them, but if it's closer than anything else we found so far, then we can be sure that this code will eventually arrive at the nearest one. If the nearest one is the last one on the list, obviously the last time we go through this, it will be the best one we ever found, and it will be better than all the previous best ones. And so we'll set it. If the very first one is the closest one, then on our first loop we'll set nearest usable so far, and then every other time this check will fail. Nothing else is as close, so we will never replace it. So yeah, this ensures we end up with the correct one. And then if nearest usable so far is not equal to null, if we found nothing at all within range, then it will still be null. Then we want to just tell it to use. So that was a little bit long, I guess, but like I say, this is a really common pattern. You'll need to use this a lot, and it becomes second nature very quickly. Just this idea of checking each one, replacing the best candidate if this one's better, and then at the end of the loop, you know for sure you've got the best candidate. And you've got to remember that you might have had no candidates at all. So that ought to work now, I think. So first thing I'll check is that walking into a weapon doesn't pick it up, because we removed that code, so that shouldn't do anything anymore. It doesn't. Now if I press E, hey, I pick it up. I forgot to check game volume versus everything else. Let me pause this and just check what What? Okay, it's a 0, great. So you should only hear game sound through my mic, which will be bad quality, but at least it won't drown me out. Cool, and now if I go close to this one and press E, nothing happens. Oh, that's interesting. And also, I've got a kind of blank weapon in my list now. Let me check and see what's going on here. The player, so I'm holding the railgun, which is right, that's the one I've been firing, but it seems like I have something in my list that's not valid. Oh, I picked up a whole load of railguns. Oh, because when I'm carrying it, it still has a usable component, so we need to fix that. So every time it's doing what I asked it to do, this is the curse of programming. It'll do exactly what you asked, even if you asked for something you didn't mean. Of course, once I've already picked up the railgun, it's now the closest thing. Nothing can ever get closer to me than the one that's like embedded in my chest. So every time I try and pick something up, I just pick up the railgun again. And we didn't sort of check that the thing isn't already picked up. So there's two different ways we could do this. We could say when you pick it up, you disable the usable component. I think that makes most sense. Yeah. And let me think. So we could even have usables. If every usable in our whole world would always be a single use, you can only be used once, then we would probably just say this.enabled equals false. So as soon as you pick it up, the usable component turns off. I don't know. I think in our case that is fine. That would work for everything. You know, treasures are going to go into your score or whatever. Weapons are going to go into your inventory and not be picked up again. What's the other thing? Guards are going to be killed and won't come back. So it does sort of make sense. But I still don't think that's a good place to do it. I think that each individual thing should decide whether it's usable. I'm going back and forth on this because it's slightly awkward. So if weapon behavior, let me just talk through my thinking on this because maybe that will be informative. The alternative is to have be picked up by player. It would have to get a reference to our usable and then enabled equals false. So we could do that. So the advantage of this approach is that each individual thing, whatever the usable runs, is going to decide whether it should disable itself or not. But the downside is that all of these different components will all have to look up a usable component and then interact with it in some way. And they sort of, basically all these different scripts will have to know something about how usable should work. They have to know that when you pick it up, you disable the component. Now, as I've talked it through, I don't think that's good. I think that's the bigger downside. So I think it is better to have. Let's actually do it the proper way. So what I wrote the first time is what we're going to do pretty much. We're going to write this.enabled equals false. Actually, I'm really curious. Can I just remove the word this? It looks like I can. I can just say enabled equals false. Okay, so that disables itself. The only disadvantage of this is that we might have a case someday where we want a usable you can keep reusing. Like, let's say, do you remember those health dispensers in Half-Life? You have to hold the use key on them and they health keeps flooding into you while you're doing it, and then if you release, you can reuse it again later. If you wanted something like that, this wouldn't work because the moment you use it, it disables itself. So rather than having that be completely set in stone, let's just have a public bool for can be reused. And that will default to false. Bools just start as false when you set them that way. So then after we use a usable, it is going to set its enabled status to whether or not it can be reused. So if it can be reused, that will stay true. If it can't, then this will be set to false. In fact, so that's fine, that code works fine, but I think it's a bit clearer if we say, if can be reused equals false, then let us disable then enabled equals false. That's the exact same logic, I find it clearer if it's written that way, where we say if we can't be reused, then disable ourselves. Yes, so that public bool will just be a checkbox now. We should find that in our weapon prefab. Can be reused, yeah, and it's unchecked. So if we checked it, then we'd be able to keep picking them up, but we don't want that, so let's do it this way. Yikes, this level is still a little bit tricky. I'm not going to be able to test this. Let's move to level 1, because that was a karma level. Oh, but does level 1 even have multiple weapons? Yes, it's got 2 weapons, good. So, press E to pick up this one, I can fire it. And then, oh god. It's a real pain when the game actually becomes challenging. I think this duck in and out peekaboo strategy is dominant. And then if I press E on that, sure enough, I get the shotgun. And now if I press right mouse, I get the Uzi, and my weapon list is correct. Let me just see the weapon list. Yeah. All good. Okay, cool. I think this will also fix. Do you remember we had a bug where I think the Uzi has multiple different triggers on it, and so you can sometimes pick up like 3 Uzis accidentally. I haven't seen that bug in ages, but it was on my to-do list to fix that. And actually we don't need to now because our usable system overrides that. And there's only one usable component, so we will only pick up the thing once as long as we make sure we disable the usable component right after you pick it up, which is what we've done. So that's nice. We've now got a pickup system. I think the next thing we should do is let's add treasures, because that's just a thing that I am keen to add, so that I created a new game object that's a sphere. I'm going to drag the gold material onto it. I have to get right down the bottom of this inspector list. It's a bit large at the moment. It's just like a gold orb. In fact, let me create an empty game object first, and let's put both of these at 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to reset on the transform component. Now I'm going to hit F to jump to where they are. And what I want is for the sphere to be a child of the game object. Excuse me. Because, like I say, it's bad practice to have a shape of something on the root game object, because then if you want to scale the shape, you've got to scale the game object, and then everything else that you want to add into it has to have a weird scale to compensate for that, so that's bad. So this should always be 1 on 1 for scale here, and then I want this to be smaller, so I'm going to say, let's just try 0.5 in all dimensions. It is sunk into the ground, so we could also lift it up. So now if the treasure is at... I'm actually going to call them antiques. Since this is a museum, I think the valuable things that don't do anything should be called antiques. And yeah, they're just going to float on the ground for now. If we have time today, we might make the plinth that they go on, which has defined the whole theme of the game now, even though it isn't even in the game yet. And what do we want? We want this to be usable. So let's give it... no, sorry, I don't want a new script. I want usable. We're giving it a usable. Now let's give it a... I think should I call the script antique? Yeah, why not? Antique behavior. So a new script for this. It's going to be very simple. For now, it's just going to destroy itself. So, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to click that. Why did I do that? It was taking too long to load, so I got impatient and clicked the button again. So we just want a public void be collected. This is a bit like the be picked up that the weapon behavior has, but it's going to do something different when we do it, and for now it's just going to destroy our game object. Just want to destroy ourselves, and I can delete all of that, don't need them to do anything. Public void be collected. And the reason I want that now is so that I can hook up the usable to do that. So, plus sign. Game object is going to be this one. And the function is going to be, it's on our antique behavior, and it's going to be, actually let me just see, could we have made this, no. We could make it set itself to be inactive. I was just wondering if there's a built-in function to destroy it, but we want custom antique behavior anyway, because eventually this is going to add to our score. So be collected is the function we want to run. So on our current game object, on the antique behavior component, run the be collected method. And that will just destroy it. So it's right in the middle of the arena right now. Let me make it a prefab, so I'm going to drag it to the project folder first. And then now that it is a prefab, I'll duplicate it, because that's good enough, and all the differences will propagate, will be the same everywhere. Any changes we make will apply to all of them, is what I'm trying to say. Press E, it gets destroyed. Cool, I can now collect treasure, and I can pick up guns, all with the same button. So yeah, that'll be, I think once we have a gradiated alarm system, that'll be cool to decide whether you want to take the treasure or whether you're going to take a weapon. Once you've got a good weapon, maybe you're going to focus more on collecting treasure. We'll probably do limited ammo at some point too, and see how that feels. So that's it for treasure. Let me just, what I might do is just give it a light, because it's a bit hard to see at the moment, isn't it? I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I think the plinth that we make is going to have a light on it too. Ooh, that's nice. Should I just try that? Yeah, sure. Well, no, let's make it yellow, because it's a bit, what's the word? Wan. It's a bit wan, that light. It could even be warmer, couldn't it? Too warm. Looks like a hazard. Yeah, that's quite nice. Well, it's not nice, it's just, it's very clear. It's my main priority. Cool. So then the last thing for usables is to make them take out the guard. So let's start by going to the guard behavior, and to be honest, the script we're going to write is a lot like the last one we wrote, which is, well, let's see. Public void get knocked out. Knocked out is a that's how I'm thinking of it, but I don't know if these are actually humans. Their unconscious state is going to be exactly the same as death, I think. And so we could just do destroy game object, but since we just did that, let's get a bit more fancy and say get component health system, and then what I kind of want it to, so we can have it take damage. Let's just write take damage 100, and that will kill it. Does it like that? Yeah. I thought it was saying an error for a minute, but it seems to have got over it, recovered. So now on to edit the guard prefab. Got to be careful not to edit one in the scene. It's got to be the prefab. And we will give it a usable. Add component usable. And plus sign. Drag the guard himself into the object field. Find the guard behavior in the script field. And then go to get knocked out for the method. So that should work right off the bat. Let me check that it does. That take 100 damage thing is real shoddy. We should change that if this works as expected. Yeah, it blows up. I've zoomed in a bit, which I didn't mean to. Oh, bloody hell. So treasures, in another game you might want them to be picked up automatically, but we're going to have these wired to the alarm system. I like that they blow up. So I was thinking of it as a stealth kill, and so I was thinking maybe we don't want the explosion, but actually this explosion is very satisfying, and it's going to raise the alarm. It's not going to trigger the alarm. It's not going to, maybe we should say it's going to raise the alert level. So it makes sense that there's some kind of noise, like if it's totally silent, maybe you'd ask, why is this raising the alert level at all? Cool, well that was really fast. We're done on that. Oh yeah, the only thing I wanted to do is I don't think, take damage 100 is a bad way of doing this, because we don't know how much health they have. And you might say, okay, well 100's outside the realm of possibility, we're working with like 4 or 5 health in most cases. But we might decide to change the scale of health. We might decide that everything's going to have 100 times more health now, because actually we need more finely grained damage so that we can have a new weapon system or something, and then this code breaks. And that's fine if we remember that we wrote that and we think, okay, it broke because it's only 100, but you might forget, and that's the killer with debugging, is you forget you did something a certain way, and every game of significant scope gets to the point where it's impossible to hold all the code in your head. I think it just can't be done. So we already have a variable called max health, so we could pass in max health there. I just find that a bit cumbersome because we would have to write, where did guard behavior go? We can't just write max health in here because like we're writing this as guard behavior. We don't have a max health thing. It's the health system has a max health. So now we're going to do get component again. Are we going to set up a variable to store this get component? It gets just a bit clunky. And really, it seems like quite a nice idea to have just a standard public void kill me. I think that's what we'll say. And all that does is take damage, max health. So that ensures we die. It might do more than our current health. You know, we might have less than this. Oh, in fact, yeah, why not? Let's make it current health. Then we always exactly kill ourselves. I can't think of a reason why it would be bad to do too much damage, but, you know, who knows? We might do some kind of overkill effect or something. So yeah, let's just have that say kill me. And in fact, that's a good example of why we want its own function for this. Because if I wrote in here, it should do the max health. That line is cumbersome to write. And also, once I've written it, I might change my mind about whether we want current health or max health to be the amount that we knock off. And that kind of change should be a change we make to the health class, not to the guard class. We don't want to remember that all these other classes have made assumptions about how it works. Yeah, so I guess I'll just quickly check that still works. Should behave exactly as before. Cool. That's actually very satisfying. Let me also test what is... oh no, I want to play level 1, please. I won too quickly. Oh yeah, taking out a single guard on level 1 ends the game right now. So that's awkward. Let me just check what the range is on picking things up. Okay, that's quite generous, isn't it? That's 3. Let me reduce it to 2. If we were going to tweak this a lot, then I would want to make this a public variable that we could tweak at runtime, but actually I think that it's going to be fine. I don't think it's going to be too hard to figure out what the right value is. I think it's going to be 2. So what I kind of want to do now is make the plinth. Let's make the plinth, since I said this game is going to be called, it's going to be named after these plinths. Let us make an empty game object, put it at 0, 0, 0. I'm actually just going to duplicate it. No, I'm not. That's stupid. I'm going to right click on it and say create cube, and I hope that goes at 0, 0, 0. It does. I wanted to see it in the scene. Here it is. And in fact, it's looking nice already because I happen to put it at the same place as the antique. And the antique has a light on it, which is telling me that we should have a light on the plinth. So in fact, let's copy... This will be interesting. If I copy the light out of the prefab there and shove it in here and reset its position and then move it up like this, that's quite nice. And in fact, let's bring... I'm just going to remove that light from the antique prefab now that we've used it on the plinth. Delete it there. And then I'm going to move this antique back. I want it at the same location as this plinth because I'm going to write the word plinth. It's a fun word to say, it's a fun word to write. I want to see what it looks like when something is on the plinth. So plinth is arguably... Well, first of all, the cube is actually in the ground right now, isn't it? This is not a half-height cube. This is a big cube that's embedded in the ground. Let's think. What I was interested in trying is what does it look like if we rotated it around the x-axis so it's kind of tilted, so it's like a... that would actually work better if it was also longer in the z-axis. This is just the cube we're scaling now, so that might be too long. Let's go for like 1.3. And just tilt that so that it's basically flush with the ground. And maybe also make it a bit wider too. And now, where is the treasure? The treasure is completely embedded in it. So let's also move this. What position do I want? I think it's Z position we want to change. Yes. Okay, this needs a shallower angle if we want to showcase something at that height. Oh my god, that way moves so fast. Why does it move so fast? How does that look? That's alright. It's a bit weird. Maybe maybe I was wrong to make it deeper. Maybe it should just be... I don't want to drag that arrow because I don't want to move in that direction. I want to move it in the axis direction, which seems to work better if you do this. Yeah, let's just do that and then maybe sink it a little bit further. Okay, cool. That's a plinth. I'm also going to change its color a bit. I think I'll make a new material for it. Create material. Right-clicked on the project folder there to do that. And I'll call it plinth material. And all it's going to do is just have a different color. Let me assign the material first to the cube. So I'm going to drag the material over to the very bottom of this. And it won't have any effect yet because the plinth material is just the default material. But now as I change, when I click on the plinth material again and I go to change the color of it, we should find that the changes are reflected in real time. Yeah. That's not bad actually. I wasn't going to make it gold because then it makes the gold treasure less special. We could just make it... What color is a plinth? I want it to be a warm color so it contrasts with the background a bit. And we've used enough dark stuff. I think something like that is alright. We're not artists. Well, I'm not. We can leave these things as they are. So I wanted to try that because I'm curious if we move both these things up against the wall, how does that look? If all of our weapons and stuff were up against the wall. Looks quite nice. I'm really wanting to sort of zoom in on this thing all the time. I wonder if we just make the camera be closer. Let me just align view to selected, and then it's already pretty tight, isn't it? We'll just go a bit tighter. And then this is a real callback now, but we can then say align with view, so that the game view is... Why is it still zoomed out in the game view? I don't know. Let's get even closer then. For some reason I've got to make it... Okay, that's better. Yeah, shall I make that light a bit stronger on the plinth? It could be... its range could be increased. It's kind of nice. That's very strong. I think it's in slightly the wrong position, isn't it? Let me... Bloody hell, its range is enormous now. I can't remember in what direction was it the wrong. Oh yeah, it wasn't close enough to the wall. Yeah, it's fine. And render mode important. Okay, so now I want these to make it a prefab, drag it into the project folder. I'm going to duplicate it, and we'll only bother with level 1 for now. We'll just make these for the weapons, because I'm hoping that the advantage is that this will be make it a bit clearer where things are. And let's duplicate that one. We'll rotate it again to have it against that wall, and the last one can just be on the opposite wall, and we'll put a weapon in one of these. Put weapons in 2 of them, I guess. So yeah, there's a treasure on one. Let's move a treasure to... I'm continually calling them treasures when actually they're antiques now. That one I'll just delete because we've got 2 weapons to place as well. The Uzi can go on this plinth, and then the shotgun can go on the last one. Where is it now? This is level 1, so we want it to be easy. It doesn't matter that everything's kind of trivial to get at. Alright, cool. I was also going to label them. I don't know if we have time for that. They do look rather similar, don't they? That's cool. I guess actually, there's one more game logic thing to do here, which is that when you use a guard, that should only work if the alarm is not triggered. So we want to do if references dot, oh damn it, references dot level manager dot alarm sounded equals false, then it's okay to knock us out. But if the alarm sounded, then we're alert, and this shouldn't work on us. We could make it so that it only works from behind, but that's a slightly more complicated bit of logic. And in general, as I said before, I am thinking of this as once the alarm has gone off, everyone knows where you are all the time. So that is better this way around, I think. And just to be clear, I think maybe we should rename this to, let's call it knockout attempt, because it may not work. If the alarm's gone off, then it doesn't knock you out. And I also just want to check, did that update? So a usable script, no it didn't. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Okay, that's a slight annoyance with this system, is if you rename the function, you've got to set this reference up again. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised about that, but that's not too hard to fix. So let me check that's working. So after I fire a gun, I'm going to try and knock him out. Well, first of all, let's check that I can still knock him out normally. Yes, you have to be pretty close, but it works. And then if I shoot and then use him, yeah, nothing happens. Cool. How are we doing for time? Got about 5 minutes. In that case, let me do just the Plinth labels. So if we edit our Plinth prefab, I can't focus on it because the light is so big. And I want there to be a label here. So if I create a UI canvas, it's going to go kind of nowhere at first because it's canvas default to screen space, but we can make them world space, and that means the you know, if a canvas is, well, it's like a canvas, normally they're attached to the screen, so wherever you look the canvas is on your view, but you can just put them in the world as well, so it's as if the paper is on the floor or on the wall, and that can let you write things in the world. And I think having the labels on the ground would be nice because it's a bit less intrusive than a UI label. If we had annotations on them on the UI level, like we do with health bars, those go on top of everything else, and so these labels would clutter things up. I think it's fine to just have it on the ground, and also it fits with the museum theme that they would have little labels on them. Where is our canvas? Okay, first thing I'm going to do with this canvas is I'm going to add an image to it, add component image, so that way we can see its full size. It is enormous. It's really enormous, it's unimaginably huge. I'm going to change its width and height to 1. Excuse me, I'm trying to select it now, hit F to zoom in. Its position is in some crazy place, let's reset that. Still, this is, what the hell am I seeing now? Why has it gone back to 100? Didn't I just tell it to be 1? It's kind of weird. Anyway, now it's small enough. So the reason there was loads of them there is because we were seeing the scene that has a load of these in them, in it. I want this to be lying down, so I will rotate it around the x-axis by, looks like -90 is the right thing. That now it's in this weird place, so you'll see this sometimes. It's called Z fighting. The reason being, as it happens in this case, it is the Z dimension, at least relative to this canvas. When things are at the exact same height, the game doesn't really know which one to show you, which one is on top, because there is no absolute answer to that. They're both at the exact same height. That never happens in reality. You've probably never seen this in real life, because it's just a thing that only happens when things are at exact coordinates. So we just want this to be slightly higher, just slightly raised up off the ground. And let's make the image black, actually. I mean, this is all a bit... I guess it's fine. I guess it's fine. And I'm going to make it... I don't know, what's happened there? Why did it get bigger again? I mean, why did the height get bigger as well as the width? What is that behind it? Is there two of these? If I move it over here... Why are there two canvases? Are there two plinths? Is it... And now in the real scene, there's only one of each. I think we've got into a weird spot where, now is it project settings or preferences? Let me see, editor. Okay, the prefab editing environment level 1, I'm just gonna get rid of this. This is confusing as hell, and it's messing with the lighting as well. So when we're editing a prefab, I just want to see the damn prefab. I don't want to see anything else. Okay, so now we're back to hopefully only having one canvas. I think it was like, because, I don't know, we're editing this prefab and it's putting the real scene in the background, and in the real scene there is an instance of the prefab at the same location as the prefab, and so we're getting two of them, but they wasn't quite the same location. I don't know, it's very strange. Let's have it directly in front of this thing. It's quite big, it's going to have to be quite big because I want it to be readable. And then the thing we're going to put on it is a UI Text Mesh Pro, which is going to be enormous. Let's say this is going to be shotgun. So we should do it in caps. And to make it less enormous, there's an option called auto size. It won't work yet because by default the auto size minimum is like size 18. I'm going to say 0. Oh, and then also it doesn't know, what we want to tell it is just fit within the canvas. Fill the canvas, but fit within it. So I hold Shift and Alt on this anchor thing, and I hit that one, and that means it'll only be as big as the canvas. Okay, an immediate issue with this. What we're actually looking at is the back of the canvas. So the canvas is facing down and not up as I thought. Okay, slight aside here, you don't really need to know about it. Well, it's somewhat useful to know because it will might solve a headache one day. But look, the z-axis is pointing forward. Z is normally forward in every other context. In fact, it is forward. Z is forward. But in Unity's world, the default facing of a canvas is away from the positive axis. So in other words, when a canvas is facing forwards, the painting is on the back, which doesn't make any intuitive sense to me, but that's the convention. So we have to work around it. So let's go to the canvas, and I think it's a question of rotating it. Instead of -90, we'll do +90. Oh. And now it's upside down. That's surprising. I didn't encounter this in my test. I mean, we can rotate it 180 here as well. I'm just surprised that is the case. So this is a label that looks like it will be readable now, but it's aligned a bit weirdly. I want this text to be centered horizontally and centered vertically. And then we could also, that's kind of interesting, it set some random values here for some reason. Let's set those to 0, but actually let's give it a bit of a border, just like, oh no, all the values are enormous because everything's scaled up so much. I'm just going to give it a margin of 0.1 and 0.1 on left and right, just to make sure text doesn't go all the way to the edge. And let's make the text bold, why not? So now let's look in game, and that's weird. Their canvases are all underneath their plinths, but it's not in our scene, is it? Is it to do with the height? No. Well, that's weird. Our plinth, I mean, its z coordinate is not 0, but that shouldn't affect this. I don't see why they would have canvases in different spots. Let's go back and actually look at these instances and see if they think they're overriding it or something. It's got an override section. Let's revert all. Yeah, okay, I don't know why that happened. That's interesting. I would like to understand why Unity does that sometimes, where we never changed these instances, did we? We never edited a prefab instance. Certainly we didn't change all of them in the exact same way. But at some point, when we looked at this scene, it sort of decided all of them had a custom canvas position, and then when I went back to prefab editing, they decided they got to override my changes, which is rather annoying, but if we just revert all, it looks right. So we are going to override these instances just in a custom way by, I guess the text is upside down in some cases, which is a little bit tricky, but that's realistic, so we're all good. So let's actually label these things. So shotgun is just the default text. Let's go to this one and label the text Uzi. And then maybe we can select both of the treasure ones at the same time. Yeah, these are both treasure ones. Let me see if I can control select these two. Can I type the same thing in for both of them? Yeah, look at that. That's nice. And then in game view, antique, shotgun, Uzi. Cool, that's a lot clearer. I was never going to be able to communicate what these weapons were with art. Art in heavy inverted commas. Let me wipe these guys out. I wanted to sneak up on him there, but the fact that the swarmers were coming in from that angle, damn it. The Uzi is merciless at close range, and so that's rather awkward because... So I think on this level you'd want, if there's only one guard, the alarm level has to be 1 because when you take him out, the enemy should flood in. You shouldn't be able to just sort of win the level. Or at least, no, I guess that's not the logic we want. Probably what we want is that the level doesn't end if the spawners haven't spawned yet, because they're going to. You haven't finished stealing. Apart from anything, you want the chance to steal all the stuff, right? So, yeah, we'll have to change our level progression logic at some point, but I think that is enough for today. Looks like a museum now, which is nice.